The Steel Ghosts of Minsk, June 25, 1941. Near Minsk, Western Soviet Union. The air trembled with the roar of engines and the stench of burning fuel. Across a wide Belarusian field, Lieutenant Karl Wendorf of the 7th Panzer Division stood in his turret hatch, scanning through a cloud of oily smoke. The Wehrmacht's spearhead was tearing through the Red Army like a blade, or so they believed. "Advance! Keep formation!" crackled the radio. Wendorf's Panzer III, number 211, rumbled forward over the blackened soil. Burned-out Soviet BT-7s littered the landscape, their thin armor peeled open like tin cans. His gunner, Feldwebel Otto Kraus, smirked. "Another glorious day for the Reich, Herr Leutnant." But the mood shifted in an instant. From the tree line ahead, something moved, something large. The shape rolled out of the smoke with deliberate calm. Its armor caught the sunlight, sloped like a knife edge. Wendorf blinked. It wasn't a KV-heavy tank. He'd seen those lumbering beasts before. This one was different. Lower, faster, and strangely elegant. "Fine Panzer. Range, 600 meters. The Panzer III halted. The main gun barked, a sharp crack that echoed across the field. The shell struck the Soviet tank squarely on the glacis plate and bounced. A clean, metallic ping. "What the hell? Reload!" Another shot, another ricochet. The enemy tank didn't even flinch. Then its turret swiveled with terrifying speed, and a flash of orange fire erupted from its barrel. The 76mm round slammed into the Panzer beside Wendorf's, tearing through it like paper. The explosion lifted the German tank off the ground. "Panzerfuhr's forward!" Someone shouted over the radio. "Flank it! Aim for the treads!" But even the heavier Panzer IV's short-barreled gun struggled to penetrate. Shells struck sparks off the strange sloped armor, sliding away harmlessly. The Soviet tank, a T-34, though few Germans knew the name yet, fired again, then again. Every shot hit with surgical precision. Wendorf's unit fell back in confusion. Smoke, fire, and disbelief filled the air. "It's impossible," Kraus muttered, staring through the gun sight. "No tank can take that many hits." The T-34 lumbered forward through the wreckage, engine howling like a wounded animal. Its wide tracks crushed debris and corpses alike, never bogging down in the mud. Around it, German shells still fell, bouncing off uselessly. By nightfall, the 7th Panzer had driven the Soviet tanks back, but only by overwhelming them with artillery and airstrikes. Around campfires that evening, exhausted tankers whispered about what they'd seen. Steel beasts that couldn't be killed. Wendorf, cleaning soot from his goggles, murmured to no one in particular, "If they have hundreds of those, God help us all." He didn't know it yet, but those words would prove prophetic. The Wehrmacht had just met the machine that would change the entire war on the Eastern Front. The T-34 had arrived. The shock at Smolensk, July 12, 1941. Near Smolensk, Western Russia. Dawn crept over a shattered horizon. The ground still steamed from last night's bombardment. Broken birch trees jutted like spears from the churned soil as German tank columns of Army Group Center pushed deeper into Soviet territory. Their engines droned in a weary rhythm. Men and machines exhausted, but confident. The Red Army, they believed, was finished. Then the radio crackled. "Achtung! Fine Panzer voraus! Multiple contacts, heading south from the woods." Hauptmann Erwin Haller, commander of the 29th Panzer Regiment, raised his field glasses. Through the haze, he saw dark silhouettes advancing across the low fields, 20, maybe 30 tanks. The morning light gleamed off their turrets. More of those. New types, his adjutant muttered. Haller's stomach tightened. He'd read the reports from Minsk, tales of Soviet armor impervious to German guns. Command had dismissed them as exaggeration. Now he was seeing it for himself. "Form line abreast. Fire at will," he barked. The Panzer IVs and the 30s opened up, a line of thunder echoing across the valley. Shells streaked through the air and struck home, only to glance off harmlessly. The enemy tanks, T-34s, rolled through the storm as if it were rain. Their sloped armor deflected everything short of a direct hit to the turret ring. "Mein Gott, they're invincible," shouted a gunner. The T-34s answered with a roar. 76.2 shells ripped through the German formation, punching holes clean through armor that had once been considered state-of-the-art. Haller's command tank shook as a shell exploded nearby, showering him with dirt and fragments of another panzer. The German line faltered. Smoke and confusion blanketed the battlefield. "Target their flanks," Haller yelled into the radio. "Get behind them. They're slower to turn." He knew it wasn't true. The T-34s could pivot fast, far faster than their size suggested, and their Christie suspension let them glide over terrain that bogged German tanks to a crawl. Where the panzers wheezed and skidded in the mud, the T-34s surged forward, their diesel engines roaring deep and steady. By mid-morning, the German formation was scattered. The Soviet tanks finally withdrew, not destroyed, but out of ammunition. The field was littered with burning wrecks, and the air stank of scorched paint and cordite. As medics moved among the dead, Haller climbed from his battered tank and watched the smoke curl into the gray sky. He turned to his adjutant. "We were told the Russians were backward, primitive, but those machines..." He shook his head. "That's no peasant's tank. That's something new." Later, intelligence officers examined captured wrecks and found shocking details. Angled armor, wide tracks, a powerful 76mm gun, and a V2 diesel engine that gave it unmatched endurance. The T-34 weighed less than a Panzer IV but outclassed it in almost every way. In Berlin, Heinz Guderian, architect of Blitzkrieg, read the first technical reports with disbelief. He scrawled a note in the margin. "We must have tanks like this, immediately." But time was running out. Every week, more T-34s rolled off Soviet assembly lines, crude, unpainted, but unstoppable. The factories at Kharkov and Stalingrad worked day and night, powered by men, women, and even children. In the field, rumors spread through German ranks, ghost stories whispered over rations, tanks that shrugged off fire, that climbed hills no machine should, that came back from the dead. At Smolensk, Haller's men gave them a name. Die Stahlgespenster, the steel ghosts, and they were moving west. The frozen nightmare at Moscow. December 5th, 1941. Outside Moscow, Soviet Union. The temperature had dropped to 30 below zero. Diesel froze in fuel lines, machine oil turned to syrup, and breath crystallized in the air like dust. Along the snow-choked roads near Klin, the once unstoppable Wehrmacht was dying in place. Engines stalled, rifles jammed, and the cold itself became the enemy. Inside his immobilized Panzer III, Lieutenant Karl Vendorf, the same officer who had first faced a T-34 near Minsk, sat wrapped in a torn blanket, his gloved hands trembling. His tank had not moved in 2 days. Around him, his platoon was scattered, half destroyed by Soviet counterattacks, the rest swallowed by the cold. Suddenly, the stillness broke. A low grinding thunder rolled from the forest beyond. Snow fell from the pines as something massive approached. Motoren, hören Sie das? whispered his gunner. Vendorf peered through the periscope. Out of the white haze, black shapes emerged, dozens of them. T-34s, their hulls coated in frost and mud, their engines howling like beasts. The Soviets were counterattacking. "Feuer frei," he barked. The Panzer's 50mm cannon cracked. The shell struck the lead T-34 squarely on the front and ricocheted, vanishing into the snow. Another shot, another spark. The Soviet tank didn't even slow. It kept coming. The T-34 crushed through an anti-tank ditch, its wide caterpillar tracks gripping where the German machines would have sunk. Snow fountained behind it as it advanced, firing even on the move, a skill most German crews still couldn't match. The shell hit Vendorf's neighboring tank, Panzer 212, exploding in a burst of fire and black smoke. The German crew bailed out, screaming, their uniforms aflame. "Got him, Himmel." "They don't stop," murmured Kraus, Vendorf's gunner. He was right. The T-34s came in waves. Dozens upon dozens, painted white for camouflage, their turrets marked with red stars. They outnumbered the Panzers, 5-1. Overhead, Soviet Il-2 Sturmovix swooped down, their cannons raking the frozen columns. German infantry scattered across the road, slipping on the ice, ducking into ditches already filled with the dead. The radio hissed with frantic calls. "Command post overrun. We're pulling back. They're everywhere." Vendorf's tank took a glancing hit. The shockwave slammed his head against the hatch rim, stars exploding in his vision. Smoke filled the turret. "Engines on fire," shouted the driver. "Abandoned tank. Rouse." They stumbled into the snow, choking on the fumes. Behind them, the T-34 rolled past, indifferent, its armor blackened by impacts but unbroken. Its commander, face hidden under frost, didn't even glance at them. As night fell, the German front collapsed. The Red Army was advancing, their steel giants grinding westward through the snow. For the first time since June, the blitzkrieg had stopped. In Berlin, news of the Moscow counteroffensive spread like a chill. Generals argued, Hitler raged, and Guderian wrote grimly in his diary, "The T-34 is the best tank in the world." For men like Vendorf, freezing and defeated on the Russian steppe, it was already clear. The war they thought they could win in months had turned into a struggle of survival. And the T-34, that steel phantom of the East, had become the symbol of a new, merciless kind of warfare. July 12, 1943. Prokhorovka, near Kursk, Soviet Union. The dawn sky was a dull red, the color of dust and fire. Across the endless wheat fields of southern Russia, the rumble of thousands of engines merged into one long, shaking growl. This was the day Germany's mightiest armored spearhead, Operation Citadel, would strike the heart of the Soviet line. At the center of it all stood the ghosts of 2 years past. Men like Lieutenant Karl Vendorf, now commanding a brand new Panther tank under SS Panzer Corps. He'd survived Minsk, Smolensk, and Moscow, and now faced the same enemy again. But this time, he told himself, things were different. This time, the Germans had the advantage. The new Panthers and Tigers were the pride of the Reich. Thick armor, long 75mm and 88mm guns, engineered perfection. Vendorf ran a gloved hand over the inside of his turret, muttering, "Let's see the Russians stop this." At 05 Bos, the offensive began. German artillery thundered, and the fields ahead erupted in smoke and flame. Columns of panzers advanced in perfect formation, black crosses gleaming in the morning light. But the Red Army was waiting, from behind every ridge, from sunken roads and hidden trenches. T-34s burst out like hornets from a nest. Thousands of them, more than any German tanker had ever seen. Their green hulls blended with the grass, their guns flashing like lightning. Wendorf's gunner, Kraus, swung the turret and fired. A T-34 exploded, turret spinning off into the air. Another came straight on, hit twice, still moving. "Reload! Faster!" Wendorf shouted, sweat pouring down his face. The battlefield descended into madness. Dust and smoke obscured everything beyond 20 meters. Tanks rammed each other at point-blank range, tracks grinding steel, machine guns roaring. Soviet infantry swarmed between burning hulks, tossing grenades under treads. A T-34 crashed through a wrecked Panzer and smashed head-on into Wendorf's Panther. For a second, the two machines were locked together. Steel groaning, engines screaming. Kraus fired at zero range. The round punched through the Soviet turret. The T-34 stopped, burning, silent. But even as its crew died inside, another half-dozen appeared from the smoke behind it. Everywhere, the Germans were surrounded. Their guns killed dozens, but for every T-34 that fell, 2 more replaced it. The Red Army had learned, adapted, mass-produced. They had traded finesse for sheer numbers, and it was working. By noon, the entire steppe was a sea of fire. Black smoke coiled into the sky, and the air stank of burning oil and cordite. Wendorf's Panther was hit twice, once on the side, once near the rear. Systems failing, he ordered a retreat. As his driver reversed into a shallow ravine, Wendorf looked out through the periscope and saw them coming. Rows upon rows of Soviet tanks advancing through the smoke like phantoms. He whispered, almost in awe, "They just keep coming." When night fell, the Germans pulled back. Kursk was a graveyard of armor. Over 6,000 tanks burned across the fields. But only one army still had more waiting behind it. The T-34 had survived again, not through invincibility alone, but through sheer will and industrial might. In the months to come, Soviet factories would build them faster than Germany could destroy them. 15 every hour. For the first time, the Wehrmacht's elite panzer commanders realized the truth. The war of maneuver was over. The era of blitzkrieg had died, crushed under the endless tide of steel rolling west. The hunter had become the hunted. The road to Berlin. January 17th, 1945. East Prussia, near the Vistula River. The snow was black with soot. The villages burned behind the retreating German lines, their church spires glowing red against the winter night. The once proud Wehrmacht, the unstoppable army of 1941, now stumbled west in chaos, half-starved, half-frozen, broken. In the distance, the ground trembled again. The sound that haunted every German soldier on the Eastern Front. A deep, rhythmic thunder. Tanks. The Red Army was coming. From a ruined farmhouse, Oberleutnant Karl Wendorf, now hollow-eyed and gray, raised his binoculars. He'd fought this war from the first day of Barbarossa. He'd seen everything: Minsk, Smolensk, Moscow, Kursk, and somehow survived. But what he saw now chilled him more than the snow. An entire horizon of T-34s, thousands, rolling west, their whitewashed hulls gleaming under a pale winter sun. Their treads crushed the ice and shattered frozen streams. Beside them marched infantry columns, Katyusha trucks, and self-propelled guns, stretching as far as the eye could see. The German line had maybe 30 tanks left. Mostly Panzer IVs, a few Tigers, all low on fuel and shells. The radio crackled weakly. "Hold your ground. Delay them as long as possible." Wendorf gave a short, bitter laugh. Hold the Red Army? He muttered. With what? Then the first shells landed. Soviet artillery blanketed the horizon, a rolling inferno that turned snow to steam. The ground shook under the barrage. Wendorf's ears rang, his mouth filled with the taste of dust and cordite. Through the smoke, the T-34s appeared, fast, confident, unstoppable. Their guns flashed orange. A tiger eye beside Wendorf's position exploded, turret blown skyward like a coin toss. The shockwave flattened men and sent snow and flesh into the air. "Fire! Aim low!" he shouted. His gunner loosed a round. One T-34 burst into flames. But even as it burned, 3 more advanced around it, guns firing, tracks chewing through the ice. "They don't stop," whispered Krauss, still beside him after all these years. "They never stop." Within minutes, their position was overrun. Soviet infantry swarmed through the smoke, rifles blazing. Wendorf's tank reversed desperately, treads grinding over frozen corpses. Overhead, Il-2 Sturmovix howled down, rockets slamming into the retreating German line. By nightfall, East Prussia was lost. The road to Berlin lay open. Across the front, the same story repeated. From the Vistula to the Oder, from Warsaw to Poznan. The T-34s led the way, smashing through every town, every defense, every illusion of German invincibility. They were no longer just machines. They were symbols of a nation's vengeance, forged in the fires of Stalingrad and hardened by 4 years of relentless war. Even when they burned, others rolled past. Even when their crews died, replacements climbed in within hours. Soviet factories, now deep in the Urals, turned out thousands more. The Germans called them Der Rote Strom, the Red Flood. By April 1945, the T-34s were on the outskirts of Berlin. The city echoed with their engines, their treads grinding over rubble and tram lines. Hitler's Reich, once vast and terrible, was collapsing beneath the very machines it had once mocked as crude and primitive. In the ruins of the capital, a young Soviet tank commander, barely 20, looked across the shattered Reichstag and whispered, "For Kiev, for Stalingrad, for my brothers." His T-34-85 rolled forward, the red banner of the Soviet Union fluttering from its turret. Behind him came hundreds more. On May 2nd, the swastika fell. The thunder of the Red Army's armor ceased at last. And somewhere, among the wrecks of history, the name of the tank that changed everything echoed on both sides of the front, whispered in awe, fear, and respect. T-34, the machine that Germany could never stop, and the one that carried the Red Army all the way to Berlin.